Great. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's CTSI's Translational Science Seminar Series session. That's a mouthful. We have several CTSI affiliated staff and faculty presenting on translational science versus translational research. In addition, we will be providing information on a few pilot funding opportunities available to Penn State researchers. With that, I would like to ask that each of the four presenters give a brief introduction, and then we can start today's presentation. So I'm going to pass the torch to Kelsey Stoltzfus, who will start with introductions.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kelsey, as Ellie said. I am the Director of Pilot Programs, so I run our CTSI Pilot RFA. So if you have any questions about those, please let me know. I'm going to pass it off to Orfeu.
Hello, Orfeu Buxton, Associate Director for the CTSI, and happy to discuss translational science with you today. Nikolay.
Nikolay Dokholyan, Associate Director of CTSI and also Professor of Pharmacology.
And hi, everyone. I'm Kraschnewski. I'm so delighted to present this session, although I wish I was in Nikolay's background there. That looks pretty fabulous wherever his Zoom room is located. So thank you so much for joining us in the CTSI for this discussion. Translational research versus translational science. You probably have heard these terms. I'm hoping we can clarify some of those questions you might have about this in today's talk.
All right. Can everybody see slides? We're good?
We're good, Kelsey. You can jump right to the next one. We will also make, in addition to this recording, all of the slides available to you. So please know we won't be reading through all of the slides, but you'll have this as background. So I'm so delighted to start with the mission and vision statement for our Penn State Clinical and Translational Science Institute, or CTSI. This is something new that our leadership team has come up with this year. And as you can see, this is our commitment to translational scientists and our community to advance healthy living and health equity by supporting the research infrastructure here at the university and impacts across the Commonwealth. Next slide, please, Kelsey. So this concept of translational science versus translational research, we will spend the next approximately 27 minutes going through some very specific examples for you to help elucidate these topics. Then we'll be reserving the rest of the time for your questions so that we can get to what might be on your mind. So to start out, let's use some of the NIH, specifically NCAT's definitions for translation, translational research, and translational science. When we talk about translation, we're really talking about that process that's taking observations that are seen in perhaps the laboratory setting, the clinical setting, or in the community into interventions that then are used to improve the health of individuals and or communities. And this might be in the space of diagnostics, preventions, treatments, and medical procedures, as well as interventions for behavior change. When we talk about translational research, we really mean crossing the different translational steps, which we'll go through in a moment, in regards to research around a particular disease that's being targeted, or maybe a specific condition. When we talk about translational science, this is where it gets a little different. And we're really discussing the underlying scientific and operational principles that are involved in that translational step. So translational science in general is agnostic to disease or condition. Here you can see, in case you haven't reviewed these recently, the translational science spectrum. And so what we have here is a series from T0, which is really basic science, all the way to T4, which is translation to the population. So what are those different steps in between? Well, T1 is translating what we've identified in the basic science setting to humans. In T2, we're really focused on bringing that translation to patients. T3 is translating from patients into clinical practice. And with T4, our focus is on the population or community level. You can also see this wonderful image that the NIH uses to kind of pull all of these different areas together. This is how clinical implementation, public health, basic science, preclinical science, and clinical research are all connected. And in general, the focus here is to keep that patient or community member in the center of our focus. So passing off to Nikolay for a discussion about more specifics at each of those translational levels.
All right. Hello, everybody. So I'll start with the examples of translational research and translational science. So again, to reiterate, translational research is the endeavor to transverse steps to translational purpose for a particular target or disease, for example, developing biomarkers or a particular treatment. And perhaps, next slide, please. Perhaps one of the great examples that just came immediately to my mind is CAR T therapy. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the approach, but it's really a revolution, I would say, in cancer treatments, although it has its own limitations. But the idea is that you use its own immune system to reprogram and use your immune system to destroy cancer cells. So the way how it works, you basically extract T cells from the patient, reprogram them, and it's a whole trick how you do it. And then you cultivate it, grow millions of these reprogrammed cells and re-inject them back into the patient. So these cells, they're basically native to humans. They don't necessarily cause any trouble typically. And they now are empowered with this a way to find cancer and destroy it. So there are several steps, and it's very good to sort of think of how all of this process is going. So the basic research is a study. In doing basic research, part of the studies, scientists basically look for fundamental understanding of how our immune system works, how immune system recognize cancer cells, and identify what can be targeted on these cancer cells. And then when they discover that T cells actually can be re-engineered to express this specific element that would recognize cancer cells. Then next slide, if we go to preclinical research, then we can actually develop, or scientists can develop engineered T cells and express them that are found in cancers, and then later go into animal studies and go from petri dish basically to animals and see the efficacy of the studies in animals. Of course, animals is a step away from humans, so the next step would be clinical research. If everything is proven to be in animals safe, then the clinical research typically is broken into three phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And in phase 1, you assess the safety of CAR T therapy in a small group of patients. Then you extend it to a larger group of patients to see the efficacy of how this therapy works, and further assess the safety, because again, we are talking about few patients and we don't really know the sort of the limits of how things gonna be. But in phase 3, that's where the groups are becoming larger. And so then you confirm the effectiveness, monitor side effects and safety of this compound. And only after all the drug goes through all of these three phases, then there is a clinical implementation. And during clinical implementation, FDA basically looks at the clinical research and issues or doesn't issue the FDA approval, and if it shows significant benefits over known existing treatments. And this is very important because you don't want to bring something that really doesn't have any sort of benefit. And then FDA medical practice, and that's where the new therapy is implemented in clinical practice and providing new options for patients with certain types of cancer. And now, having said that, that's not the end of the story, because then there is a continuous development of the drug. And what's very important is a lot of studies that are going into retrospective analysis of how this drug works now in really, really large population after patients went through all of this and years after they went after this therapy, and how effective that approach has been. So that's an example of a translational research. Now let's go to translational science example, which, sorry, before we go there, I have to mention this. This is I think the hallmark of CAR T is Kymriah and Yescarta. This is two drugs that have been developed now already to treating cancer, and they have been really spectacular because you can actually get patients at the late stage cancer to be treated. And that's, I think those are really great examples of how translational research bridged the gap between the really fundamental immunological studies, molecular engineering, how proteins actually put together literally with really tiny scalpels, and and that's how they work. And so let's go the next slide is an example of the translational science. And translational science is more focused on operations, of improving the processes that would enable translation. And so if we go to the next slide, basically we'll go through a process of optimization of translational process for the, let's say, new cancer therapy. And again, there you can break it down into 5 steps, starting with basic research understanding, because and you can always think about it as 2 sort of part system. First, what is the science behind that you want to that you are pursuing, and what is the operational principle that you want to optimize? So if you think of it in this framework, translational science becomes really clear, because you're really trying to find those operational principles, this translational science of how to improve that workflow. And so, for example, in scientific principle research, scientists identify molecular mechanism of cancer, identifying key mutations, signaling pathways that drive tumor growth, for example. So then, as an operational principle, as a translational science, you want to establish, for example, develop tools for high-throughput screening of these potential targets. Developing, for example, standardized assays that would measure the activity of these targets, or any other ways to optimize and sort of amplify the studies that you can do with just simple pipetting with a single case-by-case basis. So then when you go to preclinical optimization, research optimization, again, here, as a scientific principle, scientists develop a potential compound that target a potential some mutation in a cancer cell, and investigate this mechanism of action and how it affects cell viability, and so see how this drug, whether this drug is going to work or not. But to do this most effectively, you want to really have really great assays, animal models that accurately would mimic these human cancers. And it's not only cancer. So we can talk about any diseases. You still need to go through these processes and establish protocols for testing, dosage optimization, safety, by making sure that everything is bioavailable, and going through this very complex logistics, I would say, that would enable science as research, scientific research. So say translational science enabling scientific research at a larger scale. So then we go to clinical research streamlining. So the compound enters clinical trials, and researchers study its pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, therapeutic effects. And then from operational principle, you want to design clinical studies, protocols that would basically be unbiased, inclusive, and diverse. And so you want to actually make sure that you understand the drug targets proper subset of population of patients that need to be affected. Because if you put all, let's say, cancer patients in the mix, you will significantly dilute the results, and potentially very potent drug will be thrown out, because on the larger scale it will not work. But if you know exactly your domain of application, and that's where operational principles come into play, that can be really a powerful thing. You can maybe find that the drug actually works really with high efficacy in those patients. And a great example is, imagine that your drug works like 100% in a group of patients and 0% in another group of patients. So if you average it out, it can be 10% of efficacy of the drug. So the FDA will say, well, why do we need that? But if you know your domain of application and you apply it properly, then you see the strong effect, and most likely FDA will be interested in these therapeutics. So then you have clinical implementation strategies. And again, in the scientific principle here is understanding how the therapy interacts with existing treatments and impact on patient health in general. So just to disclose that any drug that anybody takes has multiple targets in our body. And so if you have now two drugs, now you have not only you have drug-drug direct, maybe drug-drug interactions by having the same target, but it may have also other targets that be affecting, and you can have combined compound effect that is different than what you would expect from a single drug. So this is actually very, very important. And so developing a comprehensive treatment guidelines and protocols, training programs for healthcare providers, this is going to be extremely important. And I have actually a gazillion of anecdotal examples where accidental discovery of off-pathway targeting with drugs have not been considered, and it's resulted in really negative outcomes. So, and the next step is continuous improvement. So again, we don't want to just spit the drug out to the market and forget about it, but you actually want to constantly monitor, because now you have a larger and larger population of people who are using it. So we can actually track the true success of the drug in a population, and that's what the scientific principles will be going after. Operational principles would be, for example, establishing feedback loops between clinical practice and research teams, so you can have coordination of how maybe change the regimen depending on the case scenario. By the way, if you implement machine learning, potentially you can have a mediator that will be sorting this kind of sorting these processes more or less automatically. So there is a lot of potential here for example, for machine learning, how to use it for translational science. And just to finish with, and this example illustrates translational science by focusing on the principles and strategies to optimize the workflow and to create sort of easier feedback and implementation of the translational research in practice. And to finish off, I just want to mention a simple example that I just heard at the meeting at NIH, and it was really wonderful, because that's something that where translational science can really play a huge role. And one of this keynote speaker was describing his studies of some cannabinoid drugs, and he was describing that actually they have a lot of controls, because they really needed a lot of controls. But one of the critical controls is who is the handler of the animals. And turns out, from his experience, is that male handlers have totally different response than female handlers. Mice have different response to male versus female handlers. And nobody really knows why, whether it's pheromones they sense, or it's just males tend to be more rough or females more gentle. Who knows? I have no clue. But this is a conundrum that would be really interesting to answer. And if we can answer that, that can actually improve the scientific research. And so that can be a great example of translational science. Well, that's T1, and I'm passing the torch to Orfeu. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikolay. Orfeu Buxton. So I'm going to talk about primarily T2 and T3. I have a slide here. This is really a work of art. It's just a part of a very complex figure in an important meta-analysis about translational science. In short, it shows that the field of translational science, designed to systematically guide innovation to action, is a little over 20 years old. And T3 and T4 have really only emerged in the last 12 to 15 years or so. I encourage anyone very interested in this to check out this meta-analysis, but also to appreciate that if you're looking at translational science, you really want to be looking at the most recent papers for the latest types of definitions and guidance. The emerging consensus for these is that there's an addition of a T2 star, which is the very early clinical trial phases. That T2 is broadly about establishing the effectiveness of that great idea, that intervention. and particularly establishing it in a way that it can be implemented. So clinical guidelines or implementation guidelines in the community or however it might be. T3 then is broadly agreed to focus on implementation and dissemination, putting this thing that we think works into broader practice and disseminating it to others, scaling up. And then T4 is once those things have occurred, then looking at further outcomes and effectiveness research, cost effectiveness, how this affects public policy and many other aspects. Next slide. One T2 translational research example that I'd like to give was a study I was fortunate to collaborate with Julie Wagner from University of Connecticut on, and it was called Eat, Walk, Sleep in a Cambodian Refugee Sample in the US. There were multiple interventions that were tested in a randomized controlled trial, and each arm had a strong basis and many years of development towards the testing of that intervention. One of the behavioral interventions used individual level data to inform the person level intervention that was also delivered at group. But one of the key innovations was that it was implemented by trained lay community health workers in the language of the community, in the community, not the clinic. Another arm was a medication management intervention. So this was testing new guidelines using culturally sensitive translators, again, those lay community health workers, in collaboration with pharmacists to update the guidelines for managing polypharmacy. So we have a translational science seminar from Dr. Wagner on our CTSI YouTube channel. I encourage everyone to look at that. There's a couple of protocol papers also cited at the bottom of that slide. Next slide, please, Kelsey. And another T2 example, this was a cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia in older adults. We thought we were all innovative proposing telehealth, and then the pandemic hit, and that was the only option anyway. This was a standards clinician CBTI delivered using telehealth in the home of the participants in central Pennsylvania with clinicians in Arizona. There was a separate innovative group, CBTI Plus, that used a phone-based app as part of the intervention and a set of home-based Internet of Things, lights, sound, and other environmental controls to help promote a sleep-promoting environment, and that provided feedback to the clinician for extra data for their evaluations and supported their clinician treatment plan. So this would be a new implementation of a standard effective treatment, both in delivery and then how it's supported. A translational science extension of that work is understanding the use of phone-based apps generally for patient communications and considering the ecosystem of devices that are all around us, maybe not that helpful for sleep, but using those in new ways to leverage their capabilities to help with a variety of sleep disorders and, of course, many other clinical contexts. So protocol paper cited at the bottom there as well. Next slide. Finally, I'd like to close by emphasizing a phased approach. And this is to really hit home the idea that translational science is a process. It's not just a step. It's a process of many steps to take those stairs to the next level. This slide is a current funding announcement from NIH that supports the T2 to T3 transition. So for T2, it's translational science. What would be the best methods and best practice for a feasibility and scaling up component of a T2 phased innovative intervention, enabling the next step. Then there's a milestone plan and a go or no-go criteria. That intervention work, the feasibility and scaling up is feasible and can happen. And then you would get the next set of funding for a T3 that would involve dissemination, implementation, and evaluation of that innovative intervention. So the sustainability plan is a key additional element at that T3 level. What's that? Well, translational science provides guidance on what the elements would be of a sustainability plan that's likely to work. So reviewers really appreciate the systematic approach, and we have various Penn State CTSI cores who can assist with this for your application, both for this pilot program or other NIH grants. I'd now like to pass to Jen.
Thanks, Orfeu. So taking us through that continued spectrum, we're on T3 now, which is translation to clinical practice. And for the example here, I'll give a translational research project that we did. This was a 5-year PCORI-funded investigation using the electronic health record data. Basically, this Path to Health diabetes study, we looked at the comparative effectiveness of 2 different evidence-based approaches to weight loss in primary care. I've outlined the aims here, but briefly, the goal of this study was to look at preventive service coverage by insurers for intensive obesity treatment on weight loss, as well as diabetes outcomes for both patients who had weight loss and diabetes-related outcomes and received treatment versus those who did not. So what's the difference here between the translational research that we did and the opportunity for translational science? Briefly, the Translational Research Project was a health services research project that was looking to understand the impact of obesity counseling benefit in primary care. And this really connected policy with big data, linking the electronic health record data to facilitate uptake of the intervention. What's the translational science question that could be asked here? If we wanted to look from a translational science perspective, we could have looked at the fact that in order for the weight counseling benefit to have been offered, things would need to be tackled in terms of what was causing the barrier for primary care doctors to actually bill insurers. What we found in this study was there was a very small uptake of use of this treatment, even though it was covered. And that's because there were a lot of reasons why doctors actually in clinical practice didn't want to pursue this. But if we use that type of translational science project, looking at a study like this, we would be able to explore how the process of improving primary care doctor awareness or ability to bill insurers for different benefits might impact a wide variety of disease conditions, not just weight loss as shown here. Moving on to T4, which is really translation of science into populations. So this is a study that the CTSI is supporting, looking at and being conducted by our colleagues in the Cancer Institute, looking at colorectal cancer education and screening. In this project, they're looking at how to address health disparities and the fact that there's increased rates of colorectal cancer in underrepresented populations. Basically, how do we improve the screening for colorectal cancer, which is considered to be a preventable cancer if we can get ahead of it in these different communities? And so the aims of the study, which are described here, really are trying to see how we can better reach underrepresented populations with these screening applications. So let's break that down. Translational research versus translational science. So the translational research component that those investigators are studying is how they're exploring the uptake in screening at the population level. They're making colorectal kits, which are known to be effective in the clinical setting, available to the community. This goal is to reach uninsured populations and folks who may not have primary care, which is approximately 20% of Americans. So what's the translational science spin of this work? Well, one of the ways that they're leveraging translational science is by using the Line mobile clinic, which you can see just an advertisement there for the corner, in the corner. Please know that this is something that you also can explore with our CTSI of how we can support you reaching under-resourced communities. And they're leveraging the mobile clinic in order to help improve recruitment with rural and urban populations who may not have primary care at their fingertips. And if we use that translational science approach of using the mobile clinic to reach patients as opposed to the typical brick and mortar approach to clinics, this method could be applied more broadly and would be disease agnostic. And that there is the translational science spin.
All right, thank you all so much for your presentation thus far. I'm going to take over and talk about our pilot funding opportunities that we have for the coming year, and then we will end with a Q&A when I'm finished. So we have two funding opportunities that we're excited to talk about today. The first is our Bridges to Translation pilot funding, which we've offered for many years now. And then the second is a new translational science pilot funding program, which, as the name implies, is all about translational science. So our Bridges to Translation program has a long-range goal of developing, implementing, and making available new methods to promote health and predict, prevent, and effectively treat disease. We're looking to fund novel projects that encourage collaborations across the university that work to overcome those roadblocks to taking research across that T0 to T4 spectrum. More information can be found on our website, and Ellie has very kindly put the links to the RFAs in the chat as well. So Bridges to Translation is all about that T0 to T4, like we've been talking about, so I won't cover this too much more here. But the projects may request up to $50,000 in direct costs. Project period is July 1st, 2025 through June 30th of 2026. And again, the link to the full RFA is here. The Translational Science Pilot Funding Program, again, is all about translational science. So we're looking to fund pilot projects aimed at generating scientific and operational innovations to overcome those barriers to translational research. So these goals may include developing innovative approaches or methodologies in a new environment, or addressing a common barrier to translational research pathway that improves efficiencies and the disease failure rates of the research, or decreases the failure rates of the research process. So this is aligning with the NCAT's goal of more treatments for all people more quickly. Similar to the Bridges to Translation RFA, you may request up to $50,000 in direct costs. Project period is the same, July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026, and the RFA is available in InfoReady. For both mechanisms, we do have some special topic areas that will be given special consideration. So projects that focus on the CTSI and NCAT's priority areas, which include rural health and disparities, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. To be eligible for funding, the PI must hold a Penn State faculty appointment. This is tenure and non-tenure track faculty at any level, and it can be from any campus as well across Penn State. Proposals from multidisciplinary cross-campus teams that are led by junior investigators are going to be the most competitive. The application process is the same for both RFAs. A required letter of intent is due by September 13th. The full requirements for each RFA, for each LOI, are found in the individual RFAs, so take a look at those. Once we have all of our LOIs in hand, we'll review them at the pilot score level as well as with the CTSI Executive Committee to see their alignment with our overall goals and the RFA fit. And then applicants will be notified via email by October 4th. From here, we're excited to offer our CTSI core consultations for our selected applicants. So we'll review the applications and see which of our CTSI cores can help you to strengthen your research proposal. The cores are listed below. You'll be recommended 2 to 3 cores. And during your application, then you'll have a chance to discuss how you strengthened your proposal based on these consultations. For the Translational Science Pilot Funding Program, you'll also be required to meet with the pilots core, so we can really help you refine that translational science project idea. Because as you've seen in this presentation so far, it's easy, but it's also tricky at times to get it to fit within your research project. For our pre-award folks on the call, some allowable expenses for these projects are $10,000 in total faculty salaries. You can budget for others such as coordinators, students, etc. We allow up to $2,500 for publication costs and then $2,500 for travel to ACTS, which is the Association for Clinical and Translational Science annual conference. Some disallowable costs are F&A, student and postdoc fellow-led research. They can be on your team, but they cannot be leading the project. We do not allow for tuition, and we do not allow for things typically covered by departments, such as basic software purchases. We do not use IAFs for these awards. They are internal. We do use SIMS budgets if possible, but an acceptable Excel template is available if you'd prefer that. And from LOI down select to full application, we do ask that you share the name of your pre-award team and your finance team, just so we can keep them involved in the process and make sure everyone's aware of the application. Here's our review criteria for both RFAs. This is in the RFA themselves, so I'm not going to review this in detail. Just-in-time information that we require if you are going to be awarded, a signed letter from your department, any disclosures of conflict of interest from you or any key personnel. You do have to have IRB or IACOC approval before accessing your funds. Additionally, these are federally funded awards, and thus they require additional round of approval from NCATS. So I would help you through all that paperwork. It just is a little bit of extra work, but it's not too hard to get through. We also ask that you attend the CTSI pilot orientation meeting, which would take place in May of next year. We also have a great opportunity to participate in a team science collaboration planning session with our team science core lead, Dr. Susan Simpkins. This is a great time for you and your team to get together and kind of work through the challenges of having a new team or an old team and talk through how we manage our data and what publications are going to look like. They've been really exciting to witness. We also ask any PIs and key personnel to participate as a reviewer in future rounds of pilot funding proposals and submit any manuscripts that arise from your pilot award to PubMed Central to receive a PMC ID and cite the CTSI grant. If you have any questions about guidelines or anything related to the RFAs, you can reach out to our CTSI email address or to me directly. Any questions for SIMS, please reach out to ORA, as that is outside of our purview. And then finally, I just have some additional resources here at the end about translational science, some other CTSAs that are doing some innovative work in this area. All right, so I think we're going to open it up now for questions and have a nice discussion around translational science versus translational research.
While we're waiting for your questions, please do take a peek at your chat. We put some resources in there, including active links to the RFAs for both mechanisms. In addition, there's the CTSI website that you can reach out to for all of those cores. You certainly don't have to wait for your LOI to be selected in order to reach our expert consultants in many different areas. And just as a quick reminder there, we do have experts for every core almost across both the University Park and the College of Medicine campuses. So either are available to help you, but we use a lot of team science and teamwork to get that work done. And then thank you also, Orfeu, for putting in our YouTube channel, which has a lot of great resources that you can use. And just to highlight one here, we do have 5 minutes of team science with our expert, Dr. Susan Simpkins. And those are great little snippets to add to any team meeting that you have if you just want to know how your team can work better together using evidence-based practices.
I have a quick question. Did you imply that these two grant opportunities that you mentioned are more geared for junior faculty and not senior faculty?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are very eager to support our earlier career faculty. So yes, having diverse research teams that have faculty across levels will be viewed very favorably by our executive committee.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yes, emphasis definitely on teams. We look for multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary teams with folks represented across colleges and across campuses if possible. We know from science the strongest teams are the most diverse teams, and there's lots of ways to reach that diversity. Certainly, career level is one of those. Okay, if one's LOI is selected, when would the full proposal be due? Kelsey, that's a good question for you.
It is due right before we go on winter break. I believe the date this year is December 21st, but that is posted in the RFA. So you have several months to build out that full application.
And meet with cores and integrate their feedback. And, you know, speaking as an academic to the other academics in the room, you don't have to wait for the due date to submit it. It can come in a little earlier. Just thought I'd say. Never happens, but thought I'd say.
Yes, and we hope that you see the opportunity to consult with our cores as a great opportunity to strengthen your proposal. That's really our desire, even for those that won't ultimately be accepted for the RFA. Hopefully this helps your science become stronger for whatever future proposal that you're applying to. So those resources are freely available to you. They're also available throughout your pilot project journey. One of the things that we're really focused on is how do we ensure that our pilot projects in particular benefit from all of the wonderful expertise that's within the CTSI, whether that's our outstanding staff and their operational processes or our outstanding faculty and their scientific expertise. Great question. Is there a process that helps connect interested clinicians or those less experienced with research with those who have more experience? We are absolutely happy to help you with that if that's of interest. So if you have an idea from your clinical experience where we know you're on the ground level, the front lines of caring for patients, we would be happy to explore individuals who may be interested in collaborating and have that research expertise to bring to the table. Great idea. Orfeu just pinged me to remind everyone that we do have a wonderful new resource in the last year, our research navigator, Abby Fisher. And she does an absolutely tremendous job with helping individuals if you're just not sure where to go for a next step. So please do reach out. Again, the website is a great connection, or any one of us can help get you in touch too with resources that might be helpful for your research journey. So there's a question about the number of applications that are typically received and then will be selected for the full application process. This is a great question. We just moved to an letter of intent process last year. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to be respectful of folks' time. The letter of intent is much shorter than the full proposal, although the full proposal itself is not too long either. We really focused on streamlining that, not to make too much additional work for folks. Kelsey, can you please share with us how many we received last year for both of those categories?
Yeah, we had 32 LOIs, I believe, and we moved 14 forward to full application last year.
And then funded.
And then we funded 6.
There you go, better odds than the NIH. If you're considering this, I really would highly recommend you reach out to our cores, even for your LOI. They can help you think through, even after today's talk, there may be questions that you have about translational science versus translational research, help you with the lingo and the language that NIH uses in this area as well, and strengthen that by ensuring you have the right team members around the table for your project. Or if you're looking for who those team members may be, they can help with those connections as well. I feel very off the hook that there were no translational science versus translational research questions. I have to share that these are tough concepts. I attend the CTSA network meeting nationally twice a year, and these questions always come up there. So even clinical and translational science awardees aren't always sure or in agreement with these terms. So hopefully these examples that we provided today were helpful to you to kind of think through what those look like. Again, for the translational science specific proposal, we're really looking for that aim that is going to be applicable. You can certainly do translational research as an example of how to move that translational science piece forward. So, really just needs to have one aim that's a focus on specifically the translational science. And part of this too is our thank you to you for helping us get ready for the renewal. The renewal for our CTSA will have a more translational science focus. So we're working to ensure our community of researchers understand this concept as we work to prepare that next round of the CTSA. Oh, and thank you. Abby's on. So Abby, do you want to say anything about research navigation? I only gave a very brief shout out to the amazingness that you do for our team. Anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. No, just that we're available anytime and I can connect you with all of the cores. So we had a successful round of requests when we did the Bridges RFA last year. So we are ready to serve.
Thank you, Abby. Abby and the team have amazing customer service. So please take them up on that offer. They actually really mean it that they'd like to help you. All right.
This is Vinci again. I'm new to Penn State, so I'm going to take up on that offer to meet and learn about different opportunities that you have. Thank you so much for the session.
Oh, well, welcome to Penn State. Let us be some of the first to welcome you. Please do take us up on that offer. It's a big place. You know, University Park and 24 Commonwealth campuses is a lot to get to know. So anything we can do to help you in that journey, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Will do. Thank you.
That's a great segue, if there are no further questions, into some research support and infrastructure that we are providing for researchers there. Our next TSS session is on our iSmart program. This is a fairly new program and an acronym that actually stands for Infrastructure for Support, Mentorship, and Research Training. So the CTSI developed the iSmart program to improve infrastructure, support, diversity, and efficiency for research teams conducting human subjects research at the College of Medicine and across the university. So I'm going to put the registration information for that session. It's going to take place on August 27th at noon. So please do join us. If you can't join us during that time, we of course record and send follow-up slides to everyone that is registered. So please do register even if you can't attend but would like to view that recording. You'll get a link for that after the session.
Well, with that, any closing thoughts from our presenter team today?
One thing that came up yesterday, it was connecting scientists, and I think CTSI is best positioned to do that. So if you ever have a sort of a question of who would be a good partner, don't hesitate to reach out to our team, and we'll try to help you. Because I think this is what CTSI is all about, is building connections and enabling them through funding.
I just wanted to point out that many investigators who might be thinking about these pilot grants, their real intention is external funding with NIH, NSF, or PCORI or other groups. And the reason that we're spending so much effort on translational science is what makes an effective proposal for many different calls for external grants. If you apply the science of translational science within your application, reviewers who are expert in that area respond very favorably to that systematic approach, as opposed to reinventing things or being unaware that there's a particular framework or a checklist of things that would be considered compelling and responsive. So we're really trying to promote that competitiveness in your research applications going forward.
Thank you to both Nikolay and Orfeu for those wonderful additions. And thank you to all of you for joining today. I did get one additional question just to me, and Shannon, I hope it's okay. I'll just call you out. You know, you asked about how we're funding these. So we do have a combination of funding from the NIH CTSA award and internal support for these funds. And then, yes, we do try to encourage our awardees to attend the ACTS conference. So ACTS stands for, that's our Association for Clinical and Translational Science. I think all of the CTSAs nationally, there's about 60 some of us are members of that, as well as other institutions that do clinical and translational science. It's not just exclusive to the CTSA network, but yes, we definitely try to encourage folks to attend that excellent conference.
So Kristen Motley asked another great question in the chat. Are there research opportunities for municipalities? So we have a variety of community engaged research activities ongoing, a rural health consortium or a meta board that's engaging with different entities, including municipalities and community groups. So Kristen, maybe start with Abby Fisher and the Research Navigator process so that she can connect you to the right cores or other individuals working on things appropriate for the municipality of interest.
Great answer, Orfeu. All right, well, with that, we'll close the session, but our email is always open. So please reach out with any questions that you may have, anything we can do to support your research. Thank you for your time and attention today.